This story is going to begin and end with a 14-year-old girl having a M16 pointed at her head. Now I got your attention, I guess. It was December 10th, 2019. It was going to be like any other day, or so we thought. Ended up being a day that changed our lives forever. We had a routine. In the mornings, myself or my wife would take our daughter to school, hit the gym that was close to the school, and the other one would stay home with the 1-year-old, and then we'd switch, and the other person would go to the gym later. This morning, Nikki was going to take our daughter to school, and for some reason, she wasn't feeling great, so she said, "You go." And I don't know what was going on. I'm not sure why. Did I let my guard down? Was I distracted by changing the radio station or something? But as we're driving down the road, it's a pretty major road. There was a roadblock for immigration, deportation, and it was maybe a kilometer up from us, and I didn't see it in time. I'm getting closer and closer, and I didn't register. There's 2 school buses blocking the road. It's not like I couldn't see them. And when I saw what it was, and I realized there's a line of soldiers all with their automatic weapons, it was a bit too late. So our daughter saw what was going on, and she realized what was happening, and we both started to panic a little bit. I said, "No big deal. I'm going to crack a U-turn. We'll get out of here. No problem." So I started to turn the car around, and I didn't go wide enough. There was traffic coming the other way as they were letting them through, so I couldn't quite make the full U-turn. And the soldiers spotted me making the turn, and they looked and they saw my daughter in the car, and they started chasing us. Now I'm stuck. I'm teed across this road. I can't quite make the U-turn, so I gun it into the ditch, pop back up out of the ditch. They're bearing down on us. I have not even sped up yet. I look in my mirror, and there's a guy maybe 4 or 5 feet from the trunk of the car, and he's going to catch us. And I have nowhere to go. I got vehicles in front of me. I'm trying to get around them. There's motorcycles. There's pedestrians. It's just chaotic. And I looked in my rearview mirror, and I saw something that changed me forever. He stopped running. He had us. If he wanted to come around to the front, he had us. He stopped. He lifted his weapon, and he pointed it straight at my daughter. She's looking forward. She can't see this. I'm looking in the mirror. I see what's going on. And when you have a situation where your child is in that kind of imminent danger, everything changes. I grabbed her. I threw her down to the floor of the car so he couldn't see her anymore, and I just gunned it. I'm hitting motorcycles and flying through crowds of people, into the ditch, into the oncoming traffic. High-speed chase ensued. 4 soldiers on 2 motorcycles, all with M16s, chasing us down the highway. And I knew I had one opportunity and one only. I knew there's an S-curve coming up ahead of me. I was far enough ahead of them. If I could get around the S-curve before they entered the curve, maybe I could get off the road and hide behind a building or something like that. So I went for it. I looked in the mirror. They hadn't come around. They hadn't entered the curve yet. I got off the road, pulled in behind a business, and we waited. And in that moment, I'm looking out the window. I'm listening for motorcycles. I could hear my heart thumping in my chest. My mouth was getting pasty dry. You get that moment where your breathing sounds like thunder. And I'm just listening, because if I hear those bikes slow down, we're done. If they keep going, we got a chance. That was 2019. I'm going to come back to that in a moment. But I want to wind back the clock a little bit now to when I was in my early 20s. I started traveling around various countries in the world, mostly countries that didn't have the kind of privileges that we enjoy here, trying to get my head around some of the humanitarian issues in the world. I don't know if it's because I was young, early 20s, or maybe just because I was a guy that felt the need to fix everything. I kept looking and looking for the thing, the silver bullet issue. I know, I got it. I know that there's so many issues in the world. There's so many things that we can try and solve. I just thought maybe there's one that helps the rest. Maybe there's that one thing. If we can solve that, everything else becomes easier. I don't know. I'm sure it was wrong thinking, but that's the way I was wired. So we're traveling to these countries, and we're getting our head around how can we play a role, start an organization, and start taking teenagers and young adults to different countries and trying to help out. And the first thing I kind of landed on was what I thought was one of the more basic human rights, and that's shelter. So, hey, let's build some houses. Let's create a situation where we can have some, make shelter for people. If people are homeless and they can't really get a leg up in life if they don't have a place to live. So I thought that was it. Houses, let's build houses. Then I wasn't satisfied with that, so I thought maybe, well, if a child's hungry, they're not going to do well in school or anything else if they don't have any food. So maybe we need to do feeding programs. Maybe that's the silver bullet. After all, there's a ton of studies that link malnutrition to difficulties learning and that kind of thing. So, yeah, that's food. Let's do a feeding program. Then I thought, well, water. You can go a long time without food. Water. You can't go a long time without water. Clean water. So let's start raising money for wells in Africa. Perfect. Maybe this is it. This is the silver bullet issue. Water. It's clean water. Then I started chatting with a friend of mine who's a doctor, and he said, well, if people are sick, they're not going to be able to work jobs. They're not going to be able to get an education. They're just not going to be able to be contributors to society. It's medicine. That's what it is. So we started taking doctors on trips. And I remember I was on a trip. We had about 50 medical professionals, and our lead doctor pulled me aside one night. And he said, I love what we're doing. I love that we're running these clinics and we're treating a lot of people. But I'm telling you now, you're going to save more lives building a school than building a clinic. Because half the things that we're treating are just sicknesses caused by a lack of education, just by, there's some superstitions. There's things that people are they're putting themselves at risk because they just don't know. Education. There it is. There's my silver bullet. Of course, I understand. This is wrong thinking. I get it. But I thought maybe there's one issue. And I didn't think that this issue was going to solve everything. I just thought maybe there's one issue that makes all the other issues easier to fix. I settled on education. And then a couple years later, traveling through Thailand. And we were in the south, and we were headed up to the northern part of the country. And our guide, translator, host, whatever, was driving us in a car, and we're just going through the mountains and trying to get our head around what's happening, what's the temperature here, how can we be of service and be of use here. And she told me a story that it messed me up for a long time. The little girl's name was Chi Mai. I hope I said that correctly. She's a Cambodian child who was trafficked out of Cambodia into Thailand. Some guy went to the villages and told a story about, your kid can come and we can pay her to help work in the farm or in a restaurant or whatever. And the parents let the kid go in hopes that it'll generate some revenue to maybe be able to feed the rest of the family. Well, Chi Mai was 6 years old, and she was taken from her parents, trafficked into Thailand. She later made her way into Burma, Myanmar. And there's a hotel just across the Thai-Myanmar border. And this hotel is set just for, there's no other way of saying it, it's set for pedophiles. It's a hotel where people go and abuse children. And I know that. I snuck in there with a hidden camera one time. It's something that you can't even imagine exists. Well, this young girl ended up in that brothel, I guess we can call it. And there was a raid. And our guide's telling us the story. There's a raid, and a guy actually got busted, and he got caught. So there was a court case, there was arrests. Long story short, this guy got off scot-free. He got back on a plane, flew back to his home country with no charges. And the reason, according to our guide, was that Chi Mai was stateless. And I remember sitting in the backseat of that car and looking at our translator and saying, "What, are you making up words? I've never heard this word in the English language before. I did not know what statelessness was." And she said, yeah, she's not registered. She doesn't have a citizenship in Thailand or in Burma or in Cambodia. She doesn't exist. And a judge, for some reason, thought if this person doesn't exist, then there's no actual victim, there's no actual crime, we can't prosecute this person. So he walks. She ends up in an orphanage that we were later helping out. And that word stuck with me, and it haunted me. I get asked this question because I talk about statelessness a lot. And people say, well, how many people in the world are stateless? There's no way to answer that, so I'm going to try. You know when your 8th grade teacher who was really corny and tried to be funny and had a plethora of terrible dad jokes, when he did attendance in the morning, here, and then he'd say, hey, raise your hand if you're not here. And you're like, oh, that's a lame joke. That's exactly what it's like trying to find out how many people are stateless. These are a group of people that are not numbered. They're not registered. Estimates say 40 million up to 60 million. We don't know. We have no idea. We can't. And that's the problem. That's what makes this so insidious, is because we don't know how many people are not recognized because, well, they're not recognized. And then I thought I found it. I still do. I listed all those other issues that I thought would be the thing that makes all the dominoes fall. It's very tough to solve any problems if you got a group of people that nobody knows exists. See, let me back it up. A long, long time ago, in our infinite wisdom, as humans, we said, hey, let's make a system. Let's take all of the Earth's land, 100% of it. Let's chop it up into pieces. And then let's name those pieces, and we'll call them nations or states. And then all the people in them will be a part of them, so everybody will have a place to belong. Everybody will have a country or a nation or a state to call their own. This is where they belong. They have a membership, if you will. So it seemed like a good system, and they chopped up a piece of land and said, oh, let's call this Portugal. Oh, what are we going to call the people? Portuguese. That sounds good. Here's another piece. Let's call that Mexico. Mexicans. This seems like it's working. And on it went. And we had 100% of the land and 100% of the people, and they all belonged to a state or a country. And that just makes sense. But something happened. Something went wrong. One day, someone said, well, that person over here on our piece of land doesn't look like us. I'm not sure he looks like, we don't want that person to be part of our group. And they said, no, you can't be one of us. And before you know it, conflicts are happening between nations. And a number of factors have contributed to this growing number of stateless people on Earth. One of them, armed conflicts. So, for example, two countries get into a scrum, and maybe one territory gets taken over by the other, and they don't recognize the citizenship of that group of people. Boom. 1 million stateless people. Another one is birth registration. Right now, and I don't know, again, this is a number that we can't prove exactly precise, but some estimates from the UN are saying that as little as only 2 out of every 5 kids born today are being registered at birth. Albeit some of them get registered later, but that's a staggering number. That's a lot of kids to be born without being registered at birth. And then the third one is things like ethnic cleansing, social cleansing, where country says, I don't want people that look like that in our country, or maybe I don't want their children. So an immigrant comes to a country, they have a baby, and that country says, no, you're not one of us. And then the country where the parents are from, they say, well, you weren't born here, so now you got a kid who's completely in limbo and 100% stateless. This issue became very personal for me. You see, when we pull the car in behind a pizza shack, and we're waiting to see if those motorcycles are going to pass us, that all happened because our daughter is Haitian. Well, she's not. She was born in Dominican Republic. She was born to a Haitian mom who migrated there but was not legally in that country. She speaks Spanish, doesn't speak Creole. She was educated in Dominican Republic, not in Haiti. Only been to Haiti once for a couple days. But she's black. And Dominican Republic said, we're going to get rid of all the Haitians in our country. And they started deporting. So that day, we were being chased because my daughter is stateless. Dominican Republic won't recognize her. Haiti won't recognize her. She has no citizenship anywhere. So we're hiding behind this pizza shack waiting to see if these motorcycles are going to come and end our lives as we now know them, or if they're going to go by. They did. They went by. We got out of there, ditched the car in the woods, and ran home. And she's fortunate. She's got parents that have the ability to fight on her behalf, but not everybody is like that. And there's two things. There's two issues that come up when we talk about statelessness, and there's two big problems with this. Problem number one, simply a practical, pragmatic issue. Stateless people do not have access to education. They do not have access to be able to work a job for gainful employment. They can't typically get health care. And for the most part, have no access, like Chimai had no access to the justice system. They're hanging out there in this area, this world that doesn't recognize them. And they have no access to basic human rights. And that is a massive problem. But problem number two with statelessness is bigger than problem number one. And I know it's going to sound very difficult, that something can be worse than what I just said problem number one is. But problem number two is very simple. If we, as a human race, have people living in our society that we cannot recognize as humans, that is an indictment on us. That is an indictment on us as human beings. Yes, there's a problem with getting education. There's a problem with getting health care and all those things. But if we stand and look at ourselves in the mirror, and we understand that we have people living among us that we don't even recognize as humans, the bigger problem is not the practical issues. The bigger problem is us and what's happening inside of us. Thank you very much.